All right, hello all. I'm Micah. This is my brother Graham. We are Brother Telepathy. We're here with a video today. We wanted to talk about the 2025 NFL Draft rankings for quarterbacks. This is an interesting quarterback class. A lot of people like to peg it as a, not super high talent class. But we've got some thoughts that we want to share. So we'll just go straight into it with Mr. Jalen Milroe. Graham, what are you thinking, man?
Yeah, so we'll start here. Easy enough. Let me start by saying we don't agree on everything about this quarterback class, so we will have some discrepancies. But at least for now, number 5, we are putting Jalen Milroe in this spot. So for me, it comes down to the fact that you're banking on upside with Jalen Milroe, right? Excuse me. So, we let's talk about positives first. This guy has, obviously insane athleticism. So from a running quarterback standpoint, he's got elite traits in that manner. This guy is incredibly fast. It wouldn't surprise me if he ran in the low 4.4s, like Anthony Richardson type speed, probably even faster, honestly, than what Anthony Richardson ran at the combine. So I could definitely see that. So that's a huge element to his game, is his running ability. Now, on the flip side of that, he's not the best passer, right? We know that he's underdeveloped as a passer. At the college level. Participated in the Senior Bowl, didn't show out very well there. It's not really tailored to his skill set, where he can't use his running ability in a lot of the drills and things like that. So they kind of took that superpower away from him at that point. Going back to positive a little bit, very strong arm, so it is an arm you can work with. I think his mechanics need to be refined a little bit. Pretty quick release though. It's a little over the top in my opinion, so would maybe need to fix that. But it's very strong. He can throw the go ball well. But again, they didn't ask him to do a ton of difficult concepts at Alabama. Again, some of that is just due to his personal strengths and things like that. So got him lower because again, you just can't trust him as a passer right now, but there's so much upside with him that I think you have to put him in this list.
Yeah, I think five feels really like a slight to say like, oh, this is the fifth best QB in the class. But I actually quite like Milroe. Now, this is a new channel, so a lot of people don't know about my personal preferences and stuff like that when it comes to these quarterbacks. But I'm not a fan of highly mobile guys. Typically that's not something I wasn't super high on Justin Fields. I can't remember. Jane Daniels, I was actually lower on than most. So these hyper athletic guys are typically not my cup of tea. I actually really am interested in Milroe's skill set. I think that he's a stronger, more powerful runner than
You were on Milroe earlier than I was, so
I
yeah.
was. I was definitely on Milroe. Earlier in the season was his obviously this is best football he played. Team started to tail off towards the end, but I'm really excited for him as a prospect. Obviously, like you've already touched on it, a lot of growing to do. Um, but I think running wise, I mean, he's maybe the best running QB I've seen in like 3 or 4 years. So I'm
Yeah.
really impressed with his ability to run the football. But that's enough about Milroe.
His
We don't
running
need to.
ability is, I would just say, is elite. I think we can
Yeah,
consider that like officially an elite trait of his.
for sure,
So
for sure.
again, his passing is just not there. His quarterback mechanics and awareness in the pocket is just not fully there. But as a runner, it's elite. So
Yeah,
I think that's totally fair to say.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
Yeah. So going to number 4 here, again, this is where our first differing opinion lies. So on this one, Mike has obviously got Jackson Dart. I'm sure you can speak a little bit to him. I want to talk about Tyler Shuck just a little bit here, quarterback out of Louisville. So, a lot of people are going to have some interesting opinions on this guy. There's a lot of factors at play. First of all, no surprise, no secret at this point. He's by far the oldest quarterback in this class. He will be 26 by the time the season starts. Now, again, for some people, maybe you throw that out the window immediately, and you care about that or you don't. It's probably one or the other, to be honest with you. I do think it's a consideration, so I think that's why I have him 4.
How do you feel about it? How do you feel about age?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think that it's certainly not ideal. You've got somebody who you want to develop as a rookie quarterback. You want him to be, a younger guy in a sense that you still have some time to mold him. But on the flip side, there is some positive elements to him being a bit older, a bit more mature. So you don't have to develop him quite as much potentially. Now the problem with Shuck is he's not actually played that much, and the reason he's not played that much is because he's transferred. He's been injured. He's had like 3 season-ending injuries, so he's just not played a ton of football. So he's actually kind of still raw as a prospect, but does have that age too. So you're almost not getting that maturity benefit from his age. So that's kind of why, again, he's probably lower than he should be, because if you look at just his tape, this guy's got some of the cleanest tape in all of the quarterbacks out of this entire draft class. I mean, if we're talking about just purely tape, you may be talking about him 1 or 2 type of thing. But again, I think you have to consider the age, the injury history, factors like that. So that's why I have him at 4. It feels like a fair spot because I could certainly see him coming to the league and kind of lightening up. But there's also a lot of concern there with the medical and things like that. So we, of course, don't have access to that type of information. So that's kind of why it's hard to judge it exactly. But I think you have to consider those things. But again, let me clarify. From a tape standpoint, how this guy played this year, it's very good. He's got a very strong arm. He throws the deep ball exceedingly well. There are definitely times he locks onto his target a little bit too much. He's a little late on certain throws, stuff that you would expect from somebody who's not played a ton of football. But again, just from like an arm talent standpoint, he's got a quick release. He's good in the pocket. It's got a little bit of mobility as well, and then just a very strong arm. So I am optimistic on him, but again, there are those things you have to consider.
Yeah, definitely, and that's ultimately what led me to keep him off my top 5. Is a lot of the things you'd already touched on. Like the age for me is a big one. This is a very Michael Penix-like player in the surrounding circumstances, not necessarily the play, but I think that the injury history, the not late bloomer, because obviously Penix was a starter for a while, but just the age combined with not getting a ton of reps is ultimately what scared me a little bit. But the tape for sure, you're exactly right on. But Jackson Dart is my QB4. In this class. At least we're recording this also February 20th. So a lot of this is subject to change given the combine. Maybe we see these guys throw right next to one another. So a lot of this is subject to change. This is kind of where we're feeling as of today. But Jackson Dart for me, QB4. I really like I actually think he's a solid. I actually also created a chart that we might do in another video, but it's a list of all the things I look for in a quarterback. And anticipation is one that I was, is pretty high for me on my list. And Jackson Dart, given the system, obviously, it's more of like a 1 to 2 read RPO type system there at Ole Miss. So, not asked to do a whole lot, but I think with the anticipatory ability along with the arm talent, which I think he actually has some of the best arm talent in this class. I think probably him and Cam Ward, or maybe sprinkle Will Howard in there. We might talk about it here soon, but the arm talent for me is enough to put him in that top 4. But the system scares me. I've seen Matt Corral. I've seen what's the other cat that had Bo forever ago?
Chad Kelly. Maybe?
Chad Kelly. I mean, there's even before then is who I was referring to. But I get scared of Ole Miss quarterbacks, to keep it at that. And you scout the player, not the helmet. But I can't fight my bias on that. But yeah, I've got Jackson Dart on my 4 spot.
Totally fair. I'll go ahead and take over number 3 just to quickly add a couple of things about Jackson Dart, because I'm with you on all that. I like his arm talent. Again, the offense at Ole Miss is something to be worrisome of. It's very easy read type of situation, and that's credit to Lane Kiffin. He just schemes guys open and knows how to do that effectively. So it's not that difficult for a quarterback. So that is a concern. However, Jackson Dart does execute that offense very well, and so you can't just throw anybody in there to do that. It's kind of the other side of that coin. So he definitely does that well. It sounds like some fans of his in the league. He's also a tough runner too. He's not like the most athletic guy in the world, but he's a strong runner. He puts his head down and gets yardage. He's very north and south type of player, meaning he doesn't do a lot of extra movement like outside the pocket that's unnecessary. He gets upfield when needed to. He's willing to push the ball downfield, and he obviously can do it too. So there's a lot to like with Jackson Dart. There, of course, are some concerns too, with like you already talked about there, Micah. But yeah, I'm agreeing with you on most of your sentiment there.
Yeah, and then you just touched on him as your QB3. My QB3, however, is Mr. Will Howard, and this is one of my hotter takes. for the
Yeah, I'm interested to
class.
hear this.
Yeah, me and a buddy were talking about this, how we actually have it. And I'll spoil it because we probably know what 2 and 1 is. But for two for me is Shador. I won't go past that. But I argued, Will Howard in that two spot, and I think the playoff run did a lot for me. Obviously, when your best is required, what do you give? What do you look like when your best is required? And versus Oregon and Notre Dame, Will Howard's best was required, and that's what you got. Specifically, that Oregon game. First quarter was a little rough for him. He had a big, 7 route that he threw to Jeremiah Smith, which was only one guy can get it, and Jeremiah Smith is going to make that play. And then in the second quarter, he was throwing stripes all over the field. I mean, he had a seam route to Chris Olave to now I'm blanking Emeka Egbuka. Thank you. Again, the trend popping up with the names, but threw a seam route to Emeka Egbuka, and then he threw another go ball on the perimeter. Both of them perfectly in stride. I'm excited about his arm talent, footwork, and it's weird because the Chip Kelly offense, you don't know exactly what they're taught to do.
Right.
But the footwork for me was a little rough. I was a little scared of the footwork. But as far as which would clean up a lot of the accuracy problems in the short and intermediate, but I think deep ball wise, I'm really impressed with Will Howard. I'm not going to rant too long, but no, Will Howard, I'm super excited about. And then we obviously have the both Shador Sanders here. You want to go first?
Yeah, so as you guys have seen from my breakdown videos and just different discussions online at this point, obviously, let's start actually by going by some positives because I think we are going to certainly have some negatives to say.
We don't want to
But let's
rip
start.
too much because it feels like we do that a lot with Shador, but I don't.
It does.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you go.
No, it does. No, I agree. So let's start with some positives here. So first of all, he does seem like a great guy. Like he seems like he could certainly be a leader in that locker room. I personally think it would be in some ways difficult to be Deion Sanders' son. Obviously like financially and things like that and exposure to different markets and that sort of thing it's a positive thing for Shador. However, it's just hard to live up to an iconic name like that, especially when he's just not the athlete that Deion was blessed to be as well. So there were some limitations that Shador did have to overcome. Started at Jackson State, really played very, very well there, moved up to Colorado, played well there too. So the fact he's been through a few systems and has exceeded like he has is a credit to Shador Sanders. From a quarterback standpoint, obviously he is accurate with the football most of the time. So his accuracy is kind of his kind of, I've used the word superpower. I'll maybe step back on that a little bit because I don't know if his accuracy is maybe quite as hyped up as everybody's saying. Now, again, he is accurate. So, and he's definitely the most accurate quarterback in this class, in my opinion. But I'm not ready to say that his accuracy is elite or anything like that quite yet. But other positives, he does have some creativity into his game too. He's not just a robot back there. He can move around. Now, I don't like the way that he moves around, but he has that ability to do that. So there is a positive element to that as well. So just wanted to highlight a few of the positives. I know I kind of gave some backhand positives there a little bit, but I think you're probably going to go into some of my negatives. So I'll let you go, and then I'll add anything that I wanted to add to you on that one.
Yeah, and again, you've made multiple videos on Shador at this point. Everyone kind of knows where we stand. Shador, for me, I had my big board that I just finished. Shador landed at the 45 spot. I'm not.
Teaser.
Yeah, teaser. I'm teaser for the next video or one of the next videos we might do. No, neither me or Graham are super high on Shador, but again, positives. I love his accuracy for one. I think that the short to intermediate is something that is obviously most often required in the NFL, and that's what Shador shines in. So, from a high floor standpoint, I don't think he's the highest floor player ever. I don't think you plug and play him. He's a 30 touchdown, 10 interception guy or anything like that. But I think that if you want to hit your guy in a good system, which is why my personal favorite destination for him was the Dolphins, where it's kind of like a hit your guy. Getting sidetracked. I like his accuracy. I think his footwork is super polished. I love his footwork.
Great footwork. Great mechanics.
Great mechanics. His lower half and his upper half are, he is borderline spotless with the mechanics. He knows what to do and how to do it, based on the throw that he's giving, what kind of footwork, what kind of drop to give. So, footwork, I love Shador. Arm talent, not the greatest. And again, that's where the accuracy kind of wavers in that deeper part of the field is he
Right.
doesn't have the strongest arm. So
Right.
the accuracy is good from, 0 to 20 yards. Anything past that, you're like, I don't really know.
Yep.
But overall, I don't hate Shador. I just don't see him as a top 10 pick. And
Right.
at the end of the day, and I talked about this with you and a friend that I was also discussing this with, teams are going to draft on their big board. And I'm just going to make a prediction right now. I've said it before, but I'll say it on camera. Shador is not a top 20 pick. I don't foresee him being a top 20 pick. I know that there's teams who are needy who, need a quarter. I don't know what the Giants are going to do at 3. I think they addressed that problem in free agency. I don't see him as a top 20 pick, and that's not a slight to Shador because, like you said, the expectations for him are a little ridiculous. And because he's the second best quarterback, and that quarterback is a need for a lot of teams every year, we just automatically insert Shador in there, which is another, maybe thing that he has to deal with, which he's handled well for sure. I will give Shador
Yeah.
his flowers. He's handled
Definitely.
all the fame and the expectations and all that. He's handled it like a professional. So I applaud him for that. He's just not a top 20 pick for me, and I don't think he's going to be come late April on draft day.
I'm with you on that. I think it's more likely that that happens than a lot of people are realizing.
Yeah.
And one, we see quarterbacks slide all the time. Aaron Rodgers went close to the 30th pick in the draft, and I know there are different circumstances, deeper class, things like that. So maybe by sheer nature, Shador is the second quarterback taken top 10, just because of complete necessity. There are a lot of quarterback needy teams up there, but I'm agreeing with you. I just don't see how teams are going to watch the film and just and gravitate towards him as a top 10 pick. Let me also just make a couple quick points here where there are things that I think people highlight about Shador that I want to make note of that I think people are overselling quite a bit. Again, I talked about accuracy a little bit. Again, I'm with you for the most part on that one. People talk about him as a good rhythmic passer and good timing, good anticipation, something you talked about, which is a necessity. It's just not there. I mean, it's really not. That's probably my biggest thing with Shador Sanders is that he's this pocket passing type quarterback. But if you're not going to have elite arm talent, you have to be incredibly anticipatory on your throws. And he, to me, is a see it, throw it type of quarterback, meaning he's got to see his guy become open before he lets the ball go. That occurred consistently on tape. And so, he definitely has flashes of anticipation and things like that. But, that scares me quite a bit. Obviously, his pocket maneuverability scares me quite a bit. After watching Will Levis all year, pocket navigation is of vital importance. And so he just took way too many sacks. Again, people talk about his offensive line being bad. Their offensive line was bad, but so many of those sacks are Shador Sanders' fault as well. So let's
Much
not
improved
jump to
from
that.
his second year at Colorado too. The offensive line, people like to use that as an
True.
excuse. First year at Colorado, I can go with that. Second year at Colorado, it's a lot of Shador's
Right.
fault.
And that's another point you make as well, which I didn't touch on quite yet, was that I don't think the leap from Shador as a player from year 1 in Colorado to year 2 is as drastic as people seem to make it as well. His tape is very similar from 2022 and 2024. So that also scares me a little bit too. And then the last point I'll make there is that, he just doesn't push the ball downfield like you'd like to see a first-round quarterback type of do. And again, we've talked about he's very, very good in the short to intermediate. But if we're talking about taking somebody in the top 10 as a quarterback, you want somebody who can make all the throws, and he just really can't. Now, he can throw it far in terms of like if it's a go ball and he needs to float it up there to his receiver 50 yards down the field, he can do that. But the 30 to 40 yard passes that he needs to drive, cut through the air to fit into a window on a cover 3 seam ball, he doesn't have that in his bag, in my opinion. So that's certainly scary to me.
And I promise it's the last thing. And Shador's our QB2. We're hating on him, but that's because this is our QB2 at the end of the day. So this is not. It might sound like we're slamming him, but we're really not. Our second quarterback in the class is impressive. The last thing I'll say, if you're going to draft a guy in the top 5, this better be a guy with the potential to end up being a top guy in the league. And when I look at Shador Sanders and his makeup as an athlete, as a passer, as a playmaker, all of that combined doesn't scream top 5 to me. Because ask yourself, if you're thinking of Shador as one of those guys, what does his ceiling look like? Does Shador Sanders end up being Josh Allen? Better than Josh Allen? Better than Patrick Mahomes? Better than Lamar Jackson? Better than Joe Burrow? Because to me, that's a resounding no for all of those, just simply based on what his ceiling looks like. So, for me, I can't get behind the Shador hype. But, to each their own.
Yeah, and again, great point. He's QB2. I mean, and we've still got, I believe, based on what you said, and my rankings pretty close as well. We've still got a early second round grade on the guy, so that is
Yeah.
still a objectively good quarterback. But it's just we're talking about there being a stark difference between number one and number two at this point. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're at there. So yeah, we're on to our number one, which is obviously Cam Ward. So I've got a lot I want to say here. So do you want to?
Yeah,
take it
I'll
from
let
here?
you. I'll let you put a ribbon on it and then wrap up the video. But yeah, Cam Ward for me, obvious QB1, and I'm not gonna, Graham. I know Graham wants to say a lot, so I'll let Graham get to it. His Titans are picking number one, so this is a guy that he could, get used to seeing a lot. But yeah, Cam Ward for me, phenomenal player. He's kind of in that, where do you compare him to the QB class of last year? Is a question that I had to ask myself. Like, where does he stack up? To me, he's in that maybe slightly above Bo Nix area for me. Which I was pretty high on Bo Nix, so that again might sound like a slight, but it's not. I like Cam Ward. I think that his poise is what separates him from the pack. Ultimately, if he didn't have that super calm under the pressure in the pocket, I don't know what he would look like as a player, and I probably wouldn't be near as high on him. But I think that is such an elite trait for him that it'll take him far in the league, particularly if he goes to a top five team and they have, typically bad rosters are in the top five picking. He's going to have to be poised in the pocket because that's what's going to be, he's going to be required of that. And I think as a competitor also, he's up there for me. And, the bowl game, a lot of people like to give as a negative, but I actually think it's a positive. I think that him even showing up and playing a half is enough for me to say, like, yeah, he didn't have to do that. Cam Ward was always a first-round pick. He was always a top 10 pick. He didn't have to go play in the bowl game, but he did. Ultimately got them, performed super well in that Pop-Tarts Bowl with the sprinkles on the sidelines. So Cam Ward, number one QB for me.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that point. I won't touch on that, but I'm glad you said something about the bowl game because I think that's being overblown. I don't think teams are going to take a ton of stock into that personally, but we'll see what happens. So, yeah, obviously you guys know I really do like Cam Ward, and I told Micah off camera, I'm just going to stop holding back. I'm going to go all in on Cam Ward. I really like this guy as a prospect. Thinking about last year, I'm not sure I would have him over like Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, but I'd firmly have him as QB4 in my opinion. And those guys, again, that's kind of an anomaly in terms of the top of a QB class. So, QB4 last year is definitely not the same as QB4 this year. So we'll start there. Again, you guys are very familiar at this point. I love his upside. He's got all the traits that you need to be an elite quarterback in the NFL. He's got the dog mentality. He's that alpha mindset. So his football character is up there. Obviously, he's got the arm talent. Now, he doesn't have an elite arm. He's not again, we're not talking about like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen type of arm, like just pure arm talent. But the arm angles is impressive. His willingness to drive the football down the field is something that I think is a big benefit to him. The fact that he does throw those cover three seam balls, he does throw out routes to the sideline and things like that with a lot of drive and velocity. That's where I'm impressed with him. And you touched on it as well. His pocket presence is elite. I'll just go ahead and say it right there. He is very calm in the pocket. The fact that he's unwavering back there, I think will really benefit him at the next level, like you said. So there's a few positive there. Obviously, from a negative standpoint, he's not a perfect prospect. He does want to play hero ball too often. Now, what I will counter with that is a lot of folks are mistaking that for thinking that he is incapable of playing within structure. I disagree strongly on that. Cam Ward has complete ability to play within structure and has done it multiple times on tape. So it's not a Caleb Williams situation where there are concerns about him literally being able to play within structure. It's more so that Cam Ward just thinks he can make every throw on the field. And again, you ultimately kind of want that out of your quarterback. Now, it's going to result in some bad throws here and there and shots he maybe shouldn't have taken, but you ultimately would rather that than somebody who is not willing to make those type of throws. So yeah. There are plenty of instances on tape I've gone through with you guys on video here where he plays within structure. And so I think people are underselling that. I think people are underselling his processing. He's a very good pre- and post-snap processor. I think he's a very intelligent quarterback. And so, yeah, for all those reasons, I've definitely got him firmly QB1. I've actually got him as a top 10 player in this class for me personally, which again is maybe a little rich for some people. I know people have been down on this QB class. With Cam Ward in it, I feel good about it, at least at the very top. So that's my rant there, but just wanted to kind of get all that off my chest. So do you have any follow-up thoughts on any of that?
No, dude, I think you nailed it. I think we've talked these quarterbacks to death, so I'll let you finish us out here.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much all we have to say. That was our look at the quarterbacks. Like Micah said, obviously got the combine coming up in about a week per the recording of this video. So, we'll be on the lookout to see how things move. Just speaking on the combine, I really hope these top quarterbacks throw at the combine.
Yeah.
Just for one, as a fan, just pure entertainment, and then two, like you mentioned earlier, it would be really cool to see these guys throw one after another and kind of stack them with each other. So I would love to see that.
There's a ton of value in seeing how these guys look literally next to each other, because it's one thing to compare film of each of these guys in their own comfortable system. You're throwing 8 guys, 10 guys in a uncomfortable environment, eyes on them. How do you perform? And I think
Yep.
that's going to be very telling, especially for a quarterback class like this, where someone like you could have Mr. Shuck end up being like, he could end up balling out, and everyone's like, whoa, hold on a minute, maybe this is a guy who we need to start looking at a little bit higher. So,
Right.
yeah, but I think you nailed it.
Exactly. Cool. Awesome. Well, we will be talking more about draft prospects, just regular NFL offseason type stuff as well as the year goes on. But as always, appreciate you guys listening in, and we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks.
Until next time.